streaming live. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Welcome everybody this Sunday, July 31st. It is another day in 2022. Just something really cool for everybody to know. July 29th was the shortest day on record ever recorded. So the Earth spun faster, the fastest it's ever been known to spin on July 29th. So we are entering shorter days. And I think this will be a part of that huge substance we're going to be getting today, being able to talk with Eileen and learn a few things. So I'm going to introduce the subject. This week's topic is creation and the major plan of God. And it's based on Abdu'l-Baha's Tablet of the Universe and Ali Nakhjavani's The Lesser Peace and the Most Great Peace, which was edited from a series of talks he gave and then published in Lights of Irfan. Lights of Irfan, by the way, everybody, is a beautiful, beautiful collection of works of Baha'i scholars and just amazing, amazing, amazing points of view where you have actually a lot of citations and a lot of evidences for what people do to address their points. Something really good to look at. Take a look at Lights of Irfan. Eileen has been looking at this topic and it's more than timely, and no one else seems to be speaking on this topic. So in Eileen's inimitable fashion, she literally started creation and the preexistence of God. So the creation and preexistent manifestations of God, these are the subjects that Eileen's looking at, and she's looking forward to the days we are in and the role of the Baha'i faith. So she's looking at these ancient religions that we don't really look at, and she's finding this bridge between the past and the present. And we really appreciate that. And just a summary about Eileen. She grew up in Maine and graduated from the University of Kansas with a liberal arts degree. She worked in sales and raised 2 children. She was raised in the Universalist Church, but as an adult, she became a spiritual seeker. In midlife, Eileen discovered and embraced the Baha'i faith. And when first introduced to the Baha'i faith, she was seized by the fact that God has always been active in human history and that he had sent hundreds, perhaps thousands of prophets of God to educate humanity. And now, having majored in history during her university studies, Eileen was astonished to realize that the single most important factor in human history, God and his prophets, it was not recognized by professional historians. She served at the Baha'i World Center in Haifa, Israel, for 16 years in positions that required extensive research and writing. Her vocation was arranging and leading day tours throughout Israel for Baha'i World Center staff. And upon retirement, she chose to live in the Bucolic, quiet state of Vermont. Eileen's first book, 1844, Convergence and Prophecy for Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and the Baha'i Faith, was published in 2018. It explores expectations in the West for the return of Jesus Christ and simultaneously in the East for the return of the promised one of Shia Islam. Her current project is the trilogy, The Coming of the Glory, How the Hebrew Scriptures Reveal the Plan of God. And this presents a Baha'i perspective of the Hebrew Bible and its prophecies and its importance for us today. This study presents a chronological, systematic manner that ministries and prophecies of the Hebrew prophets within the context of Israelite history, how they relate. And also, the first 2 volumes have been published. And the third one, if Eileen, you could correct me, is now made available. It just got released. Yes?
The second one was just released and is available. The third one will be out next year.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. And that's exactly what I had here. Sorry. So the third one will be released next year. And it's important to remember, you can look all this up online right now. So you can look up Eileen Maddox as an author and see the writings that she's been able to produce. And she's, of course, in the process of producing. So her talk today is based on 2 major sources, the Tablet of the Universe by Abdu'l-Baha and The Lesser Peace and the Most Great Peace, which is an article on a series of talks given by Mr. Ali Nakhjavani. And most of the visuals you're going to see are from the NASA website. But that being said, it's extremely important to remember Eileen has been trying to bridge this, otherwise unknowable past and the future that we're living in now. And it's extremely valuable to highlight that these books that she's been trying to arduously put stuff together, it's definitely one of the few attempts that have been made, if at all, to try to do this kind of thing. So we definitely will recommend that you look at her books, because she's written a few and she's writing more, and hopefully more people will contribute to this area of study. With that being said, Eileen, welcome. I believe we're going to have you put a PowerPoint on. Yes?
Yes. So I will.
We are ready for that.
I will share screen. I
Yes.
will. And there it is. Can
Yes, we see it.
Okay.
We see it. Jeremiah, in audience, do you guys see it well? I see it.
Yes, we have it.
Okay.
Yes.
Onwards and upwards. I want to thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. It really feels good to get acknowledgement for the work that I've been doing, because sometimes it does feel that I'm working in a vacuum. But fortunately, my publisher, Wade Franson, with Something or Other Publishing, does recognize the value, and he's publishing my books, and I'm giving talks. But today I'm not going to be speaking about the Hebrew Bible very much. I'm, for me, going off track a little bit, because what I'm going to talk about today, I think, is crucially important. And like it was pointed out in the introduction, no one else seems to be talking about it. We all know that humanity is facing increasingly difficult challenges, crises, and denialism won't serve any useful purpose. I am going to talk about a timely subject for today, the major plan of God, which includes the minor plan of God, the lesser peace, the great peace, and the most great peace. Yes, it will get a little complicated, but it's important to understand these 5 processes, because we live in the times spoken of in all the Holy Scriptures and elaborated upon at great length in the Baha'i writings. Most of us have noticed that the plan of God has been speeded up, accelerated tremendously recently. I will be calling on 2 incredible documents. The first is the Tablet of the Universe by Abdu'l-Baha. This tablet is a spiritual description of creation and reality. It is about the creation of the universe. The second is an article that was edited from talks given by Ali Naqshbandi several years ago, The Lesser Peace and the Most Great Peace. He was elected to the first Universal House of Justice in 1963 and served on that body for 40 years. And I remember him from my years at the Baha'i World Center as a being of pure love. As we explore excerpts from Abdu'l-Baha's Tablet of the Universe, please keep in mind that he is using metaphysical and symbolic modes of speech. There are probably many interpretations for this tablet, not just the ones that I suggest. But if we can understand a fraction of what Abdu'l-Baha wrote, I think we will be doing very well. In order to put the Tablet of the Universe into perspective, let's review a little astronomy from NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. It says on the NASA Science website that our galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, has 100 billion stars. That's billion with a B. Our sun is one of those 100 billion stars, and most of the stars are thought to host their own families of planets. And how many galaxies are there? NASA estimates 200 billion, with a B, in the observable universe via the Hubble telescope. These numbers are beyond our comprehension. These figures are too much for our minds to absorb. And this is one reason that God, the Creator, is unknowable to us. How could we possibly know the creative force for 200 billion galaxies? Each undoubtedly with a plan of its own. Yet we can recognize the love and attention that God has poured into our tiny planet, Earth, that is only one of an infinitesimal number of planets. The Tablet of the Universe by Abdu'l-Baha gives an account of the beginning of the creation of the universe. Praise be to God, who hath ever caused his names and attributes to penetrate the degrees of existence, who have made the effects of those names and attributes to shine resplendent, and their signs to be firmly established in both the hidden and manifest worlds. The attributes of God are endless. We could start counting with the names of the 19-day feasts, and then the attributes found at the end of prayers, and then proceed with Ocean of Mercy, the Great Giver, and so forth. Abdu'l-Baha gave a breakdown of how these names and attributes were applied in creation. He hath ordained these names and attributes to be the first and foremost origin and cause of being in the world of creation, and the source of the different grades of realities in the degrees of existence. I think he's saying that the universe was built by divine spiritual power. Its building blocks are divine spirituality. And this spiritual power is exhibited in gradations. Abdu'l-Baha continued, when through its power of attraction and propagation, the day star of names and attributes shone upon the hidden realities in the heart of the unseen realm, they issued forth, were spread abroad, scattered about, set in order, became the recipients of the grace of God and his outpourings. They were made to be the sole manifestations of the divine conditions and eternal signs. Everything was planned. Everything worked in harmony. Everything worked in oneness. Emerging from behind the veils, there appeared, clothed in raiment of light, moving in the firmament of the unity of God, in orbits of sanctity and circles of glorification. Is this describing the creation of the souls of the manifestations of God who were pre-existent? That's what came to my mind. If so, Abdu'l-Baha's words suggest that these manifestations have been appearing everywhere throughout God's creation, appearing in forms and on levels appropriate wherever they are sent. I searched for evidence in the Baha'i writings for something more about this, and discovered that Baha'u'llah wrote a tablet entitled The Tablet of the Manifestation, which is online at Baha'i Library. Baha'u'llah wrote, everyone who is endowed with a clear insight will behold that they, the manifestations, were created before the creation of heaven and earth. and that this has ever been the throne of the merciful. They have no like in creation, nor any equal in the world of emanation. We have utterances concerning this station, such as are not befitting to mention in these days. Therefore, I won't say anything more about this, but we can certainly ponder on it. Let's return to the subject of the physical creation of the stars and the planets. Abdu'l-Baha wrote, "Thus the sons of the praise of the one true God moved resplendent in a vast infinite space, capable neither of being defined by limits nor contained within the compass of signs and allusions." Abdu'l-Baha described the stars of the universe as luminous, divine orbs. He made the circuits of these luminous divine orbs to be their lofty and celestial spheres. And he made the bodies of these spiritual spheres to be subtle and soft, flowing and liquid, undulating and vibrating in such manner that these refulgent orbs swim in the circumferences of the spheres and move in their vast space by the aid of their creator and maker, their ordainer and fashioner. Physicists describe the activity inside atoms as spherical harmonics of electrons, protons, neutrons, and other particles that are bound by the attraction of the force generated by the electric field of the atom. On one level, Abdu'l-Baha is describing the physical heavens. He might also be describing atomic orbits as well as their counterpart in the spiritual world. He said, "Divine and all-encompassing wisdom hath ordained that motion be an inseparable concomitant of existence, whether inherently or accidentally, spiritually or materially. Starting with atoms, the building blocks, everything is in motion. This movement must be governed by some check or rein, some regulator or director. Otherwise, order will be disrupted, and the spheres and bodies will fall from the heavens." There is no stasis in either the physical world or the spiritual world. And on an individual level, we're either moving forward or backward, but there's no such thing as complete stasis. We are reminded that God is infinite. Therefore, his creation is infinite. What is this universal attractive force? Physicists would say that gravity is the universal attractive force, and they are right. But before gravity, there was divine love. Love, the glue that holds the universe together, is love. The universal magnetic power between the planets and stars. The cohesion manifests between atoms of these composing elements. The conscious bestowal of God, the bond of affiliation in all phenomena, the absence of love is the cause of disintegration and non-existence. Love is the cause of the manifestation of truth, God, in the phenomenal world. The mystery of divine revelations. Love is the greatest law in this vast universe of God. The major plan of God. The Baha'i writings call God's overall plan for humanity on earth as the major plan of God, or his eternal covenant. John Hatcher gave a good description of this when he wrote, this eternal covenant is sometimes alluded to in the authoritative Baha'i texts as the major plan of God or as the most great covenant. Those descriptive phrases designate the entire systematic process whereby God sends successive prophets, messengers, and manifestations to educate humankind by degrees, with the abiding objective of fashioning a global society run according to spiritual principles. Or, stated in the terms Christ employed, the purpose of the major plan of God is the gradual construction of the kingdom of God on earth. Thank you, John Hatcher. Here's a snapshot of a few features of the major plan of God. It is mysterious in how it works. We will never be able to understand it. The manifestations of God have been innumerable, and they have come everywhere to all peoples on earth. The major plan of God is associated with turbulence and calamity and proceeds with an apparent random disorderliness, but is in fact inexorably driving humanity towards unity and maturity, using both the mighty and the lowly people who are ignorant of its course and even antagonistic towards its aim, for the fulfillment of his purpose and the eventual establishment of his kingdom on earth. This process will lead to the lesser peace, the political unification of the world. And as the major plan unfolds, its fruits can only grow in an equally unfolding new society. That's why the purpose of religion is not only to transform the individual, but to also transform society. A new dispensation cannot be poured into an old society. Jesus explained it this way: no one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch will pull away from the garment, making the tear worse. Neither do people pour new wine into old wineskins. If they do, the skins will burst, the wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins, and both are preserved. Today, we see a lot of torn garments and a lot of ruined wineskins, so to speak. The old and the new are not compatible. They are called the processes of disintegration and integration. And Shoghi Effendi wrote, a twofold purpose can be distinguished, each tending in its own way and with an accelerated momentum to bring to a climax the forces that are transforming the face of our planet. Okay. And here's some visual work. Baha'u'llah said, soon the present day order will be rolled up and a new one spread out in its stead. Let's start in the upper left corner. This is how I see the disintegrating processes going on, symbolized by dark clouds. Going down to the bottom left corner, this is how I see the integrating processes through the sun of reality moving forwards. When they meet in the middle, it may not be a happy day. Now, where are we right now in this process? I don't know. My guess is that we're somewhere here, if you can see my cursor, and that we're on schedule according to the major plan of God for these two processes to meet. The disintegration process will, of course, continue, and the old world order will be rolled up, and the integrating process will continue, and the new world order will be spread out in its stead. And there is a third line. Mr. Adib Taherzadeh, who was one of the foremost scholars of the Baha'i faith and who served on the Universal House of Justice for 12 years, states that he learned from the letters of Shoghi Effendi that an almost imperceptible third line runs between the two lines of disintegration and integration. And so here it is. This new line came into existence as a direct impact of the Baha'i faith on the minds and hearts of men. And for another visual representation, here are the forces of disintegration, the forces of integration, and the parallel force of Baha'i influence. Continuing along, the next 3 or 4 slides are going to be a bit dark, but we do have to cover them so that we can get into more cheerful material. Shoghi Effendi wrote, "The process of disintegration must inexorably continue, and its corrosive influence must penetrate deeper and deeper into the very core of a crumbling age. Much suffering will still be required ere the contending nations, creeds, classes, and races of mankind are fused in the crucible of universal affliction and are forged by the fires of a fierce ordeal into one organic commonwealth, one vast, unified, and harmoniously functioning system. Adversities unimaginably appalling, undreamed of crises and upheavals, war, famine, and pestilence might well combine to engrave in the soul of an unheeding generation those truths and principles which it has disdained to recognize and follow." And a little more dark material. On the left, this is what we're living through right now. And unfortunately, we've gotten rather used to it. And you can read this list for yourself, but I will mention that today in the Jerusalem Post, which I read to keep track of what's happening in Israel since I lived there for 16 years, there's a major article about how Iran is planning to build an atomic bomb and is threatening to wipe out New York. Now, I don't know if this is going to be reported in the New York Times or other American newspapers, but this is the stuff that's going on right now, and we need to be aware of that. And from Shoghi Effendi, quoting quoting Baha'u'llah, "The time for the destruction of the world and its people, Baha'u'llah's prophetic pen has proclaimed, hath arrived. The hour is approaching," he specifically affirms, "when the most great convulsion will have appeared. And when the appointed hour is come, there shall suddenly appear that which shall cause the limbs of mankind to quake." The day is approaching when its civilization's flame will devour the cities, when the tongue of grandeur will proclaim, the kingdom is God's and the Almighty the praised. This judgment of God is viewed by those who have recognized Baha'u'llah as his mouthpiece and his greatest messenger on earth is both a retributory calamity and an act of holy and supreme discipline. It is at once a visitation from God and a cleansing process for all mankind. Its fires punish the perversity of the human race and weld its component parts into one organic, indivisible, world-embracing community. The minor plan of God. This is our plan. This is our part to play within the major plan of God. What a bounty. The minor plan of God is exciting because it has come with an instruction manual with explicit instructions. We are no longer helplessly watching events. The minor plan, also called the lesser covenant, is between the manifestation of God, in our case, Baha'u'llah, and the people. The minor plan is the task of breathing life into the political unified body, of creating true unity and spirituality, culminating in the most great peace. The minor plan is laid out in detailed instructions and successive plans by Abdu'l-Baha, Shoghi Effendi, and the Universal House of Justice. The minor plan proceeds in a methodical, ordered way, disseminating Baha'u'llah's teachings and raising up the structure of a unified world society. The minor plan has been given to us, the Baha'is, to execute as our part in his grand design for the redemption of mankind. It is to this work that we must devote all our energies, for there is no one else to do it. It is clearly delineated, operates by well-known processes, and is a part of God's grand design, our part for the redemption of mankind. And everyone can find an area of service in the minor plan by participating in the activities of the 9-year plan. Moving right along, don't get confused between the minor plan and the lesser peace. The lesser peace, the great peace, and the most great peace. And according to Ali Naqshbandi, drawing on Shoghi Effendi, there are indeed 3 of them. Let's start with the lesser peace. In the early 1870s, Baha'u'llah wrote individual tablets to the major reigning kings and ecclesiastics of the day. These tablets are published in the book Summons from the Lord of Hosts. He proclaims his station. He exhorted them to stop their ruinous wars, to hear the sighings of the poor, to limit armaments, to be just, and so forth. In other words, Baha'u'llah offered them the most great peace. But as we know, it was rejected. Only Queen Victoria was neutral. Therefore, Baha'u'llah said, now that we have refused, that you have refused the most great peace, hold ye fast unto this, the lesser peace, that haply ye may in some degree better your own condition and that of your dependents. The lesser peace would be the most difficult way to bring global peace, but it was also quite straightforward. It's the fruit of the major plan of God, which is working tumultuously, tearing down barriers to world unity and forging humankind into a unified body in the fires of suffering and experience to bring the political unification of the world. And it will be a political unity achieved by the governments, noted for the absence of war, religious strife, and racial prejudice, though muted, will not have entirely left the hearts of mankind. The Baha'is, we will continue building our community and influencing the larger community. And after the lesser peace has arrived, it will be the Baha'i responsibility to breathe life into the unified political body, to create true unity and spirituality, culminating in the most great peace. Mr. Nakhchivan said, it can therefore be concluded that humanity has three processes ahead of itself: the lesser peace, the great peace, and the most great peace. Here are some of the markers of the great peace. The great peace between the lesser and the most will be the responsibility, again, of the kings and rulers, but the Baha'is must continue their efforts. It must be refined and infused with spirituality. It is during this time that the World Federation of Independent Nations must be established. Social and economic barriers must be eliminated. A single code of international law must be recognized. And there must develop an abiding consciousness of world civilization. Throughout the lesser peace and the great peace, and perhaps into the most great peace, the Baha'i faith will be going through its 7 stages of development. The first 4 are in various stages now in communities around the world, and the last 3 will be realized in the future. Here are the first 4 that we have achieved to some degree. Obscurity. We have come out of obscurity. That has been achieved. There is still repression in some areas of the world. Emancipation. That is when the faith is recognized as an independent entity and is honored as such. Recognition. When the faith has status as a religious organization, empowered to perform officially certain rites related to personal status, such as marriage, the possession of a status equal to that enjoyed by other recognized religious communities. And the 3 future stages: the official acceptance of the faith as the state religion of a nation, a merger between the civil system of government administration and the national institutions of the Baha'i administrative order. And when the Baha'i state of a given country joins hands with other Baha'i states, this starts the formation of the Baha'i Commonwealth, a commonwealth that will represent the initial stages of the most great peace and will operate in accordance with the laws and principles enunciated by Baha'u'llah. And this simple chart simply illustrates the process. Again, the three processes as given by Ali Naqshbandi. The lesser peace will lead to the great peace, will lead to the most great peace. And looking symbolically, this line going right down the middle is not only the Baha'is, but it includes it includes the efforts of the friends of the faith and other positive forces that are in harmony with the Baha'i faith, even though its protagonists may be unconscious of the true source of this constructive process. Aha, the most great peace. Here's an inkling. The most great peace will come through the operation of the major plan of God and the pervading influence of the divine will. Again, the major plan is very mysterious. The most great peace, as conceived by Baha'u'llah, is a peace that must inevitably follow as the practical consequence of the spiritualization of the world and the fusion of all its races, creeds, classes, and nations, can rest on no other basis and can be preserved through no other agency except the divinely appointed ordinances that are implicit in the world order that stands associated with his holy name. And all nations and kindreds will become a single nation. Religious and sectarian antagonism, the hostility of races and peoples, the differences among nations will be eliminated. All men will adhere to one religion, will have one common faith, will be blended into one race and become a single people. All will dwell in one common fatherland, which is the planet itself. Now, I couldn't forego the temptation of going to at least something in the Hebrew Bible today. And here's Isaiah. You know this verses. The wolf will live with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the goat, the calf and the lion and the yearling together, and a little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear, their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. The infant will play near the cobra's den, and the young child will put its hand into the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of God. In my opinion, Isaiah has just proclaimed the most great peace. And note where I have put some lines in bold, and I'll give the standard interpretation for them. The various animals, predators, and prey represent nations that will finally come to peace. In 1897, Abdu'l-Baha gave extraordinary information concerning a little child shall lead them. He had received a letter asking whether this verse meant a real child who was then alive. And he answered, verily, that child is born and is alive, and from him will appear wondrous things that thou wilt hear of in the future. Thou shalt behold him endowed with the most perfect appearance, supreme capacity, absolute perfection, consummate power, and unsurpassed might. His voice will shine with a radiance that illumines all the horizons of the world. Therefore, forget this not as long as thou dost live, inasmuch as ages and centuries will bear traces of him. And there are two books in particular, Memories of 9 Years in Akka and The Priceless Pearl, which go into this at great depth of how Abdu'l-Baha acknowledged who Shoghi Effendi was. And I am just a little confused. I did underscore, they will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain. And that refers to Mount Carmel, the location of the seat of the Universal House of Justice, symbolic of the Baha'i faith, whose progress will not be deterred because it is the heart of the major plan of God. For the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. The waters are the dispensation of Baha'u'llah. And I was missing one slide there, so I apologize. Now, it's human nature to ask when, oh, when will the Baha'i faith be accepted as the global religion? I found an extraordinary piece of information presented by Adib Tahirzade on when this will happen. And it's from volume 4 of the Revelation of Baha'u'llah. Once Barker asked Baha'u'llah, how will the cause of God be universally adopted by mankind? Baha'u'llah said that first, the nations of the world would arm themselves in infernal engines of war, and when fully armed, would attack each other like bloodthirsty beasts. As a result, there would be enormous bloodshed throughout the world. Then the wise from all nations would gather together to investigate the cause of such bloodshed. They would come to the conclusion that prejudices were the cause, a major form being religious prejudice. They would therefore try to eliminate religion so as to eliminate prejudice. Later, they would realize that man cannot live without religion. Then they would study the teachings of all religions to see which of the religions conformed to the prevailing conditions of the time. It is then that the cause of God would become universal. Preparing to assist the processes. It's comforting to know that we can be a vibrant, positive force in this disintegrating world. It is important to become knowledgeable about the processes at work, what's going on, why, and so forth. I urge everybody to read Shoghi Effendi. The Promised Day is Come. And there's also a tutorial that's shown in the middle on The Promised Day is Come that was published just a year ago in 2021. Also, Citadel of Faith, Messages to America during his last 10 years of life. In addition, Dr. Kamran Sadegh produced an excellent compilation called A World in Travail, Understanding and Responding to Events in Our Time. He is a computer scientist and professor at Western University in London, Ontario, Canada, and a Baha'i. It's free. He compiled 98 pages of quotations from the Baha'i writings about the travails of these times. This compilation is free and can be found online at Baha'i Library, or just do a simple Google search. Cameron Sadegh, A World in Travail, and it will come right up. And read the Bible. I mean, I just have to say this. Read the Bible? Yes. Abdul Baha said, you must know the Old and World Testaments as the Word of God. That is our mandate. How else can we have meaningful conversations with Christians and Jews if we don't know the Bible? And how else can we know and respect that all of the Hebrew Hebrew prophets foretold the coming of the Bab and Baha'u'llah? The legacy of the Hebrew prophets deserves our attention because they spoke of our day. Now, it might sound difficult for someone who is not familiar with the Bible to become knowledgeable about it, but I made it easy for you by writing the Trinity, the Coming of the Glory. And this 2 volumes are out. The next one will be out in 2023. These books present the Hebrew prophets in a chronological, systematic manner within the context of Israelite history. I have done the work for you, in other words. All of the Hebrew prophets foretold the coming of the Bab and Baha'u'llah, and all of them provided perspective on the challenges that humanity is facing today. To wrap up, let's keep in mind what the Universal House of Justice wrote in the next to the last paragraph of the Rizvan message that we received 3 months ago, and it's shown here on 2 slides. Our joy at seeing the community of the greatest name go from strength to strength is tempered by our deep sorrow at seeing the persistence of conditions and conflicts in the world that create misery and desperate suffering, in particular at observing the recrudescence of destructive forces that have disordered international affairs while visiting horrors upon populations. We know well and are reassured that, as Baha'i communities have repeatedly demonstrated in many different contexts, the followers of Baha'u'llah are committed to offering relief and support to those around them, no matter how straitened their own circumstances. But until humanity as a whole undertakes to establish its affairs on foundations of justice and truth, it is, alas, fated to stagger from one crisis to another. We pray that if the recent outbreak of war in Europe is to yield any lessons for the future, it will serve as an urgent reminder of the course that the world must take if it is to attain genuine and enduring peace. The principles enunciated by Baha'u'llah to the monarchs and presidents of his time, and the weighty responsibilities with which he charged rulers past and present, are perhaps even more pertinent and imperative today than when they were first recorded by his pen. For Baha'is, the inexorable advance of the major plan of God, bringing with it ordeals and upheavals, but ultimately impelling humanity towards peace, justice, and unity, is the context within which the minor plan of God with which the believers are chiefly occupied, unfolds. The dysfunctional state of present-day society makes the need for the release of the society-building power of the faith abundantly clear and pressing. We cannot but expect that for now, convulsions and disturbances will continue to afflict the world. You will no doubt appreciate then why every earnest supplication we offer for all God's children to be relieved from bewilderment and bitter hardship is coupled with an equally heartfelt prayer for the success of the much needed service you are rendering for the cause of the Prince of Peace.
So I have a question. There's a question about how you had mentioned about this child, and you said it was Shoei Effendi. So where was the source again for that?
The source was Afrotech's book, Memories of 9 Years in Akka, and also The Priceless Pearl by Ruhihi Kano. And in The Priceless Pearl, I think it's on page 6, but in Afrotech's book, you can easily find it by going to the table of contents.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So everyone who's on, please feel free to raise your hand, send a message, and on social media, Facebook, YouTube, we're looking for your questions. We appreciate it. With that being said, there's a question. It's kind of interesting. At some point in your PowerPoint, you had mentioned about the days, about this day, and something relating to how fast everything's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find it interesting that on July 29th, 2022, it is the shortest day ever for the world?
Yes, and I was going to mention that up front. Thank you, John. I find that immensely interesting. You see, the physical world and the spiritual world are intertwined beyond our understanding. Some people call the earth Gaia as a spiritual being, and there is much truth in that. And the physical world, I believe, is revolting against much of what humanity has done. It's called climate change, but it's also called wobbling on its axis or spinning up its turning. I'd appreciate it if you could send me where you read that. I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised. We're going to be seeing a lot of these anomalies soon. And there's also a headline, I think it's in the New York Times this morning, about how Eastern Kentucky has suffered one crisis after another, after another, after another. Tornadoes, floods. Why is one section of the country being hit so hard? There's a lot of things that are going to be happening. Thank you. Science, Forbes, very good. An extra 1.59 milliseconds. Well, very interesting. The earth literally, physically is responding in its own way to what humanity is doing, has been doing.
Well, it's interesting because I'm not entirely sure if and again, this is not per se a view that anyone else may share, but I don't think that the Earth per se, from the context of climate, is in one way or another doing just one thing, and a lot of things are happening at the same time.
Yes.
So I think a big point is that where we look at climate change, we also look at the Baha'i writings, and Baha'u'llah talks about every atom in existence being created by God to teach us.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a quote that the equilibrium of the world, equilibrium hath been upset by this most great, this new world order, by the influence. I have to, hold on, let me pull it up. The quote, equilibrium.
John, while you're looking for that quote, I'm going to ask my question, which is, what's the difference again between the major plan of God and the minor plan of God? Can you highlight that for us?
Yes, the major plan of God is totally God's. He works in very mysterious ways. It's been ongoing since probably, and I'm guessing here, since the creation of humanity. It's the progressive revelation of many, many messengers of God. But in short, the major plan of God is God's plan. And the minor plan seems to be relatively recent. And it is sort of the opposite, although it's working to promote the major plan. The minor plan is completely understandable. It comes with an instruction manual from Shoghi Effendi and the Universal House of Justice. The 9-year plan is the latest chapter in the minor plan of God. Basically, it belongs to the Baha'is. We have the primary responsibility for it. But we're also aided by like-minded people who may or may not realize that they are assisting the process.
So I pulled up two quotes. There's one from here, the one that was referenced. It says, the world's equilibrium hath been upset through the vibrating influence of this most great, this new world order. Mankind's ordered life hath been revolutionized through the agency of this unique, this wondrous system, the like of which mortal eyes have never witnessed. There's many places in Baha'u'llah's own words, the words that come from Baha'u'llah, not describing anything, not interpretation, but from Baha'u'llah as is translated into English via Shoghi Effendi and so on. It talks about how the atoms of our world are proclaiming this revelation and so forth. And it's something worth acknowledging, that as we'll find on the Baha'i website, baha'i.org, it is cited about nature, that nature is God's will and is its expression in and through the contingent world. It is the embodiment of God's name, the creator. So a lot of people think nature around us, well, if you want to find God, look around you, they say. Well, that's not per se the case. It's the embodiment of God's name, the creator. And further, it's something that as we look at the world, Shoghi Effendi says, we need a change of heart, a reframing of all our conceptions, and a new orientation of our activities. The inward life of man, as well as his outward environment, have to be reshaped if human salvation is to be secured.
Excellent. Thank you for bringing that up. There are literally books and books of information and quotations that apply to the subject today. And that's why I had to narrow it down basically to two sources, even though I did go off on a couple of tangents. It's an immense subject. And I also feel a little bit nudged to mention, if you believe that events are being accelerated and more trials and tribulations are coming beyond what we have already been through, you might want to consider, first of all, what Shoghi Effendi, according to Pilgrim's Notes, said: if you can, move out of the city to the countryside, and also stockpile whatever you can, not to extreme lengths, and not in the prepper sense, but because we know that there are going to be major issues with supply routes and empty shelves. Use a little foresight and stock up on the essentials, like toothpaste.
I think Alex has a question. So, Alex, I'd like for you to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay. Eileen, thank you for this. It was so helpful to see all of these different concepts put in the sequence like that.
Thank you.
But my question is about the Tablet of the Universe. Elohi Aflakiyeh. It is such an unusual tablet in Baha'i writings. The language, the imagery that Abdul Baha uses is such a pleasure to read. Just for the pleasure. There's an audio version of it, which is a pleasure to listen to. So the only English translation I've ever had of this is translated by Anonymous. So I was wondering, is that what you use? And is there an authoritative translation available?
I don't know. I used the Anonymous, and I'm assuming that it was approved by the House of Justice, which might be an assumption maybe I shouldn't make, but I'm assuming that it was, and the translator just wanted to remain anonymous. If it had been a provisional, it would have stated provisional, and you will find provisional translations online. This didn't say it, so I'm assuming it was approved. And it's so different from how Abdul Baha usually wrote.
Yes. And is the PowerPoint from this presentation, is that going to be made available for us to download for reference?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes. I will. Oh, it takes Jeremiah and John maybe 3, 4, or 5 days to put it up. And yes, you can go back, and when it's up, you can go back to it, catch some of the end notes, attributions.
Thank you very much.
We have a comment from Thomas, and he says that I guess you should come visit the Baha'is in Japan. So our friend Thomas, who's on the call, must be from Japan. So
I would love to come, but international travel isn't on my agenda right now. But travel within the US is, carefully, very carefully.
would you be able to recommend any other books or anything else that's kind of in the same line of thought as this subject matter today? Or is there more resources that you could point us to, or just the PowerPoint's a good start?
The reason I did this PowerPoint is because I just haven't run across anything else that covers this. I mean, sure, people read Shoghi Effendi, Citadel of Faith, and all the rest of it. We're all familiar with what has been said about these days. I don't know of anyone else who's working with the Bible as I have, who's still at it. In other words, Hushida Motlagh, Motlagh. All his books are excellent, but they're reference books. They're not narrative, but they're available through Amazon and are extremely valuable. The reason I went into this area, the Hebrew Bible, was because nobody had done it in a systematic, chronological manner. And that's why I really can't give suggestions for other similar material. And
Why do you think people haven't done it? Like, is there just no understanding of the concept because they don't have the framework of the Baha'i text, or is there like no one's really thought of it because they don't think it's happening or it's going to happen because they've already had that point, like the Millerites in 1844 and all that concept, everyone was disappointed when their understanding didn't pan out the way they thought it was. So going forward from that point on, is there a consensus amongst the academics or amongst people in the theological field where they just don't want to talk about it anymore, or like
all of the above, Jeremiah, all of the above. It's a niche area. What the Hebrew prophet said had nothing to do with the Millerites, except, of course, Miller interpreted correctly the year 1844. He had no way of understanding that a new prophet was coming. That was just not in his mindset, and that was not his fault. And as I bring out in that book and that Zoom presentation, which is online with Clearwater, the Millerite movement happened for a divine reason, and it's still serving its divine purpose, i.e., many millions of people, Adventists, who are still awaiting the return of Christ and need to be taught, if they're willing to be taught, that the new Christ has come, the Bab, and then the Baha, and then Baha'u'llah. I think basically Baha'is don't understand, or let me just say, there's nothing new under the sun. Okay, there is nothing new under the sun. All the religions have pointed to this day, but the Hebrew prophets were unique. Actually, the Hebrew prophets were unique within a major religion. I don't know if any other religion had the equivalent of the Hebrew prophets. And they were prophesying for today. And one of my pet peeves is people who say, oh, I don't believe in prophecies because they never come true. Well, they do come true. They have come true. But it's the sort of thing that sometimes can only be recognized after it's happened. 1844 could be figured out easily through what Daniel said, but the tumultuous times that we're in, people think, well, they were just referring to the Babylonian conquest. Well, no. Yes, I should say yes and no. there are also many passages, for instance, about Israel, modern day Israel. And it's prophesied very clearly that Israel will not be defeated, that she will not only survive and defend herself, but she will prosper throughout the ages. And I haven't gone into the book of Revelation a whole lot, but from what I have read, I think the whole Gog and Magog may be connected with a major war in the Middle East, in Israel fighting for its existence, but it will survive. And I think it's Ezekiel who will be in my third volume that I'm writing now, alludes to this. And he mentions that it will take 7 months for all of the killed, the bodies of all those who are killed in this war to be found and properly buried.
You
But
know,
go
sorry,
ahead.
I don't mean to cut you off, but it brings to mind because I'm trying to understand. This goes back to the question I asked earlier about the difference between the major plan of God and the minor plan of God. And what you just referenced, George Vaya put together a presentation that we did almost 2 years ago on Bible prophecy. And he kind of goes through that chronological kind of analysis of history from a standpoint of historical references and how the different Shia and Sunni kind of heads of state throughout that historical context created certain events that could be understood in the context of prophecy. So my question then at that point, based off of that video, which I highly recommend everyone go watch, but in reference to when you were speaking about how the Baha'is are essentially part of the minor plan of God, what were in context, were all the previous religions part of the minor plan of God, or were they part of the major plan of God?
Oh my.
And the minor plan is simply was established at the point of the Bab and Baha'u'llah. That's what I'm trying to understand.
Okay. I cannot answer that question definitively.
Okay.
Yes or no. I will say that I'm under the impression that the minor plan is new, that it did come into play, so to speak, during the dispensation of Baha'u'llah. I don't see any sign of it, in previous times because they were so different. Previous times were not building or trying to build world unity or world justice or any of that. So I would say I'm inclined to say that the minor plan is new with the dispensation of Baha'u'llah.
Okay. And just the one last question is, so your second book, does it discuss this particular topic that we've discussed today, or is that another topic? And then what's the third book going to talk about? Just a little cliff notes, and then I'll turn it over to John and we can start our wrap up.
Okay. Volume 2 does not discuss the major and minor plans of God to any extent. I think Volume 1 in the introduction, I may go through it, but sometimes I honestly have forgotten what I've written and what I haven't. I get so caught up in what I'm doing in the present. The second volume, you want to know what's in it?
Yes, if you could give
we
us
go into the pre-exilic prophets. Isaiah, first Isaiah. There are 3 Isaiahs. We go into first Isaiah, Jeremiah, Micah, Amos, Hosea. We get into the really good stuff in the second volume. And then the third volume will cover the exilic prophets, Ezekiel and Daniel, and the post-exilic, those who came after second and third Isaiah, Zechariah, and so forth.
Thank you so much for that. John, are you have any last questions?
At the moment, I think we're fine. I think that we've been able to cover quite a bit, and it's a good place for us to, well, start reflecting. And that being said, we want to thank you so much for being able to come and describe for us a few points that really put some text that we have already access to and may not be reading right now into perspective. So as Jeremiah pointed out, the only person I can think of who's no longer with us anymore on this earth is George Vaya posted something about the connections to Islam in Book of Revelations and so forth, and that you'll find in Some Answered Questions of Abdul Baha. That was an interesting point, but yet again, we're not talking about the past and these ancient prophets. And we recommend all of you who are watching today to definitely view Eileen's other videos we have online, and those will go back to ancient civilizations such as those that built Gobel Tepe. Can you
Gobel Tepe. Gosh, I've forgotten.
Well, the ancient civilizations with names that we cannot pronounce at the very moment, but it's online and you can see them. We appreciate your patience as I'm not providing the best of search key terms, but you can look on Clearwater Baha'is on the YouTube channel, and Eileen's videos with us are there. We welcome you to watch them. And secondly, we also recommend that for future talks you join us when we plan on having Eileen speaking on another subject of a similar manner again. So with that being said, we thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Eileen, especially for talking about this. Abdul Baha's Tablet of the Universe is something I'm not even, without having people like you come and talk about it, I'm not familiar with. So it's good to be able to come and expose us to these things so we can go and look at them. And likewise, that's the end for this. We recommend you go do some research, look at these quotes that Eileen has cited, where they come from and the context. We want you to learn, and this is the starting place. And of course, Eileen has a few books that she's authored, which we recommend you also look into, that you'll find online. Again, you can purchase them on Amazon. And one thing for people who are buying Baha'i literature, we definitely recommend you go to places like Amazon or your local bookstore. Your local bookstore or an online bookstore that you shop from. It is not just supporting Baha'i literature, but it's also showing that there's a desire for those books, and they'll continue to supply those books and those third-party outlets. So if worst comes to worst, you can't find it in the third parties, of course, go to the Baha'i Publishing Trust, and they have quite a bit. Well, we wish you a wonderful afternoon, and we thank you for joining us here in Clearwater Baha'is.